At my father's retirement party, my brother made a toast to Dad, who raised one successful son and one disappointment. He pointed at me. Everyone laughed. I raised my glass, smiled, and left. They didn't know I'd been anonymously funding Dad's pension top-up for 8 years, $4, 200/month. The next day, I stopped the payments. When Dad's pension check came 63% smaller than expected. My name is Salvador Reyes, and I'm 34. I'm a stylist in San Diego, which means I make other people look put together for their big moments while I quietly learn how to hold myself together for mine. 2 months ago, my father threw a retirement party at a rented hall off Harbor Drive. String lights, catered food, a cheap banner that said "Congrats, Ricardo," like it was a championship parade. My brother Mateo took the microphone like it belonged to him. He lifted his glass and smiled at the crowd. To Dad, he said, voice warm and practiced, who raised one successful son and one disappointment. Then he pointed at me. People laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, not an awkward cough. Real laughter, open mouths, leaning shoulders, the kind of laughter that tells you exactly where you stand in a room. I raised my glass. I smiled. And I left. They didn't know I'd been anonymously funding my dad's pension top-up for 8 years, $4, 200 a month, every month, like a second heartbeat. They didn't know I'd been the difference between comfortable and counting cents. And they definitely didn't know what I'd left behind. An envelope taped under my father's gift bag, addressed in my handwriting, but sealed with someone else's name. Because hours later, when that envelope was opened, everything changed. And the next morning, I made one phone call and stopped the payments. When Dad's pension check came 63% smaller than expected, nobody laughed. Not anymore. People always ask how you can love your family and still feel like you're drowning when you're around them. I tell them it's simple. Some families don't hit you. They just erase you, slowly, politely, with smiles. I learned early that be flexible meant be invisible. Birthday math. When I was 9, Mateo turned 12 and got a full backyard party. Bounce house, hired clown, the whole thing. I got a cake the size of a dinner plate and one balloon. I remember staring at it while my father took a picture. Smile, Sal, Mom hissed, pinching my elbow like kindness required compliance. I am smiling. My father glanced at the camera screen, then at me. Smile like you mean it, he said. Don't make this weird. Like my face was the problem. Like my disappointment was already my job. The scholarship that didn't count. In high school, I won a scholarship for an arts program. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to make me feel like the world had cracked open and light had gotten in. I brought the letter home and set it on the table like it was a medal. Mateo barely looked up from his phone. My father read it, nodded once, then slid it away like a utility bill. So, he said, what's the real plan? This is the plan. He sighed, the way men sigh when they want credit for patience. You can't cut hair forever, Salvador. I'm not cutting hair forever. I'm learning. You know what I mean. He tapped the table twice. Mateo's going to business school. That's stability. That's a future. Mateo smirked without looking at me. Later that night, I heard Mom in the kitchen telling Dad, he's sensitive. Just be careful. And my father said, if he's sensitive, he should toughen up. The world won't coddle him. The world didn't have to. He already had a family for that. Adult labor disguised as help. At 26, I was booked solid at a high-end salon. Brides, photo shoots, corporate gigs. I was finally earning real money. That's when the calls started. Hey, Sal, Mom would say, sweet as a spoonful of sugar. Your dad's truck needs repairs. Hey, Sal, Dad would say, blunt and proud. Mateo's got student loans. You know how it is. Hey, Sal, Mateo would say, lazy. Can you spot me? I'm good for it. I'd send $300, then $700, then $1,500. Sometimes Mateo paid me back. Mostly, he paid me back with jokes. You're like our family ATM, he'd laugh. Except you actually have feelings. Once, at a family dinner, he clinked his fork on his glass and announced, everyone, a toast, Salvador's paying again. People laughed. I smiled. I swallowed it. Because I'd been trained to believe that if I didn't laugh with them, I'd be the problem. The pension secret. My dad worked for the city for decades. He wasn't rich, but he was proud. Then a reorganization happened. New rules, new pension tiers, complicated paperwork that looked designed to exhaust people into giving up. I found out by accident when I visited my parents and saw my father at the kitchen table staring at numbers like they were enemies. Mom was rubbing his shoulders. He didn't notice me at first. I did everything right, he muttered. I did everything right, and it's still not enough. My father hated being vulnerable. He hated it so much he turned it into anger the second he saw me. What are you doing here? He snapped, like my presence had caused the pension. I came to help, I said carefully. What's going on? He pushed the paper away. Nothing you need to worry about. Mom shot me a look over his shoulder. Please. So I sat. I read. I did the math. And I realized the ugly truth. His base pension was going to be smaller than he expected, and my parents were going to pretend everything was fine until it wasn't. That night, I called a financial counselor I knew through a client. I asked questions. I learned about a legal pension top-up program, a way to supplement his retirement benefits through structured monthly contributions. It could be done quietly. It could be done anonymously through a third-party service. It would cost a lot. It would cost me comfort, vacations, a bigger apartment, the kind of success my brother loved to brag about. I did it anyway. I didn't tell them. Not because I wanted credit. Because I knew what would happen if I did. My father would call it charity. Mateo would call it weakness. And Mom would call it keeping the peace, which meant keeping me small. So I set up the top-up under a donor label, Harbor Trust Services. Every month, for 8 years, for $1,200 left my account. Every month, my father stayed proud. Every month, I stayed invisible. When Dad announced he was officially retiring, Mom called me like it was urgent. Salvador, she said, we're doing a party. Your dad deserves it. I agree. It's at the Bayview Hall. Saturday at 6. We're inviting everyone. Your uncles, your cousins, the church people, your dad's co-workers. How many people? She hesitated, like numbers were shameful. About 92. 92 people to watch my brother perform. 92 people to witness me being placed in my assigned corner. Mateo's handling the speeches, she added. You know how he is, he's charismatic. Charismatic. That's the family word for he can say whatever he wants, and you'll still end up apologizing. I bought a new suit anyway. Not flashy. Clean lines. Dark blue. A stylish suit. Sharp, controlled, respectful. I showed up early because that's what I do. I arrive early so nobody can accuse me of not trying. The hall smelled like roasted chicken and cheap floral centerpieces. A banner stretched across the wall. Ricardo Reyes, happy retirement. Mateo was already there, pacing like a producer. He saw me and grinned. Look at you, he said, sweeping his eyes over my suit. Trying. Hi, Mateo. He leaned in like we were friends. Just so you know, he murmured, we're doing assigned seating. Okay. He pointed across the room. You're at table 8. I looked. Table 8 was near the back, half behind a speaker. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't even creative. Dad's table is up front, Mateo added. Family table. Obviously, I said. Mateo's grin widened, like he'd won something. You can still see, though, he said. We didn't totally banish you. I wanted to say something sharp, something clean, but I heard my own voice in my head. Don't cry here. Not here. So I just nodded. A woman in a black blazer was setting up a small display near the stage. Pension paperwork, a framed certificate, a neat stack of envelopes. I recognized her from emails. Lydia Park, the pension coordinator I'd worked with through Harbor Trust Services for years. She'd never met my father. She'd only ever spoken to me. Her eyes flicked to mine. A tiny nod. That was all. My ally didn't hug me. She didn't gush. She didn't make it emotional. She just acknowledged me like a professional and kept doing her job. That steadiness felt like oxygen. The party filled in. Dad's old co-workers slapped his back, told stories, laughed too loud. Church ladies hugged Mom and called her blessed. Cousins took photos in front of the banner. Mateo floated through it all, shaking hands like he was running for office. I stayed near the back, sipping soda, answering small talk with smaller smiles. Then Dad walked in. He looked good, gray at the temples, shoulders still straight, wearing the watch I'd bought him 3 Christmases ago, even though he'd told everyone Mateo bought it. People cheered. Mom wiped tears. Mateo rushed in like the hero's son and hugged him hard. Dad, Mateo shouted. This is for you. Dad beamed, soaking it in. Then his gaze moved across the room and landed on me. For a second, his expression softened. Just a flicker. Then it hardened again, like softness was a betrayal of his image. He walked over, stopping at arm's length. Salvador, he said. Dad, you look great. He nodded once. You came. I said I would. He glanced around, lowering his voice. Try not to make it about you tonight. The words were so familiar, they barely hurt anymore. But the way he said them, like he was warning a dog not to bark, still made my stomach twist. I won't, I said. It's your night. Good, he said, and walked away. I watched him go. I watched Mom follow him. I watched Mateo slip into the center of every photo. And I understood something with a sudden, quiet clarity. This party wasn't for Dad. It was for the story they liked telling about themselves. And I was the punchline they used to keep it entertaining. Dinner started. Then came the speeches. Mateo clinked his glass and strode to the microphone, smiling like a man about to do a victory lap. I felt my pulse pick up. Not fear. Recognition. This is the stage, I thought. This is where they do it. Mateo began with the safe stuff. Dad worked hard. Everyone knows that, he said, gesturing to the crowd. He sacrificed. He showed up, every day, for this family. People clapped. Dad puffed up, pleased. Mateo continued. And as his son, his successful son, I've always tried to honor that. A few people laughed, like it was charming. I didn't move. Mateo's eyes found me anyway. They always did. He shifted his grip on the mic, setting the moment like a comedian setting a punchline. And hey, he said, tilting his head, Dad didn't just raise one son. More laughter. He paused, letting it grow. He raised two. He looked directly at me. And one turned out great, he said. And one turned out. He dragged it out. A disappointment. Then he pointed. At me. Right there. Public. Clean. The room erupted. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make my ears ring. I saw a cousin cover her mouth, laughing. I saw my aunt stare at her plate. I saw Mom freeze, halfway between smile and panic, like she knew it was wrong, but didn't know how to stop it without breaking the family script. Dad chuckled. Actually chuckled. Like it was harmless. Like I was supposed to laugh too. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Mateo leaned into the mic, feeding off the reaction. It's okay, he said. We love him anyway. Someone has to be the cautionary tale. More laughter. I stood. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just stood. My chair legs scraped the floor, and for a second the sound cut through the noise. People near me turned. I picked up my glass. I raised it. Calm, controlled. And I smiled. Mateo's grin widened, like he thought I was playing along. There he is, he said into the mic. Good sport, Sal. I didn't say a word. I set my glass down. Then I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't slam the door. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a scene. Outside, the air was cool, salty. My lungs pulled in the night like I'd been underwater. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from Mateo. Mateo, don't be dramatic. It was a joke. I stared at it. My thumb hovered. Then I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking until the sounds of the party dulled behind me. I got into my car and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt. Because something in me had finally gone still. A clean, quiet decision. I drove home. And I slept like a man who had nothing left to prove. Hours later, the envelope. At 10:17 p.m., Lydia Park sent me an email. Subject line, envelope delivered. 2 sentences inside. Left as instructed. Your father received it after you departed. He intends to open it tonight. I stared at the screen. I hadn't planned it as revenge. I'd planned it as an end. Because there was something I'd arranged weeks earlier, before the party, before Mateo's toast, before the laughter. I'd asked Lydia for a formal pension projection letter. Not a vague statement. A detailed projection with and without the donor-funded top-up. I'd asked her to include the donor label. And I'd asked her to include a clause summary. Continuation contingent upon respectful conduct and non-harassment toward donor. The clause existed. It was standard in the service agreement. I'd never needed it. Until now. At 11:02 p.m., my phone rang. Dad. I let it ring twice before I answered. Hello. His voice was different. Tight. Confused. What is this? He demanded. What is what? This letter, he snapped. This pension thing. Harbor Trust Services. It says. He stopped, breath scraping. It says I've been receiving a supplemental contribution. He continued, slower now, like the words didn't fit his mouth. For years. Yes. Silence. Then sharp, who did this? I leaned back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. I did. More silence. I could hear Mom in the background saying, Ricardo, what is it? What's wrong? Dad's voice lowered, almost afraid. You, he said. How? I set it up. 8 years ago. What do you mean you set it up? I mean, I've been paying $4,200 a month into the top-up program. That's not. His voice rose. That's not possible. I exhaled once. It's possible. It happened. Mom's voice got closer to the phone. Salvador, she called. What is your father talking about? Dad kept going, like he couldn't stop himself. Why would you do that? He demanded, anger rushing in to replace confusion. Why would you do something like that without telling me? Because if I told you, you would have rejected it, I thought. Because if I told you, Mateo would have taken credit, I thought. Because if I told you, you would have made it about pride instead of reality. Out loud, I said. Because I didn't want you to worry. Dad made a harsh sound. You think I want charity? It wasn't charity. It was planning. Mom's voice was trembling now. Sal, that's so much money. Yes. I could hear her crying. Then Dad's tone shifted, suddenly pointed. And what is this clause? He said. It says continuation is contingent on respectful conduct toward the donor. Yes. He swallowed. Are you threatening to take it away? I thought of Mateo's finger pointing at me. I thought of Dad laughing. I thought of his earlier warning. Try not to make it about you tonight. I'm not threatening, I said. I'm telling you what's true. Dad's voice turned hard. You're doing this because your brother teased you? It was almost impressive how quickly he minimized it. You think that was teasing? I asked. It was a joke, he barked. A toast. People laughed. Don't be so. Don't, I said, cutting through him without raising my voice. He stopped. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I said, very calmly, you don't get to rewrite what you did to me. Dad breathed, furious. You're going to punish me for something Mateo said. No, I said. I'm going to stop volunteering for a role that only exists to shrink me. Mom sobbed openly now. Please, she whispered into the phone. Salvador, please don't do this. I closed my eyes. My voice stayed even. I'm not doing anything tonight, I said. I'm going to sleep. Dad snapped, Salvador. I ended the call. The next morning, the stop. At 8:40 a.m., I called Harbor Trust Services. A man with a polite voice answered. Harbor Trust, this is Noel. How can I help you? I need to suspend the donor contributions immediately, I said. Effective today. There was a click of keys. May I ask why? I stared at the sunlight on my kitchen floor. Harassment clause, I said. A pause. Understood, Noel said, voice turning more formal. We'll process the suspension. You'll receive a confirmation email within the hour. Thank you. I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. The check, 63% smaller. It took a few weeks for the first retirement check to arrive. My father called me the day it hit his account. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He said, my pension is wrong. It's not wrong, I replied. It's smaller, he snapped. It's, papers rustled. It's 63% smaller than what we planned for. That's the base, I said. Without the top-up. His breathing turned ragged. Mom's voice broke in, desperate. Salvador, please, your father can't. He can, I said, gentle but firm. He's been able to for 8 years. Dad's voice went low, dangerous. You can't just take it away. I didn't take away your pension, I said. I stopped adding mine. You owe us. No, I said. The word landed like a door shutting. Dad went silent. I could almost hear him trying to find the old leverage. Guilt. Obligation. Shame. It didn't fit anymore. You're going to embarrass us, Mom whispered. I laughed once, but it wasn't happy. You mean like last night? I asked. Like the toast? Like the laughter? Mom made a sound like she'd been hit. Dad growled. Mateo didn't know. I paused. Are you sure? I asked. Dad didn't answer. And that was answer enough. The aftermath didn't arrive in one dramatic wave. It arrived in messages, 1,000 tiny grabs at the old me. Scene 1. Phone blowing up. Mateo called first. I let it go to voicemail. He texted. Mateo, okay, enough. Tell Dad you'll turn it back on. Mateo, you're really going to do this? Over a joke? Mateo, you always do this. You always make everything weird. Then came the voice message, his tone different now, flatter, edged with panic. Sal, he said, listen, Dad's freaking out. Mom's crying. You're going to ruin his retirement. Just turn it back on. I'll talk to him. I'll apologize, or whatever. Or whatever. That was the closest Mateo ever got to remorse. I didn't respond. The apology that isn't one. Mom drove to my apartment 3 days later. She didn't call first. She knocked like she owned the door. When I opened it, she stepped inside immediately, eyes red, clutching her purse like a weapon. "Salvador," she said, voice shaking. "This is tearing the family apart." I closed the door behind her. "It wasn't held together," I said. "It was taped over my mouth." She flinched. "Mateo feels terrible," she insisted. "Does he?" "Yes," she lied. Then, softer. "Your father is humiliated." I watched her carefully. That word. Humiliated. Not hurt. Not sorry. Humiliated, because people were seeing what he'd tried to keep hidden, that he'd needed help, and the son he mocked had provided it. Mom stepped closer. "Just turn it back on," she begged. "You can't do this to your father." I held her gaze. "I'm not doing anything to him," I said. "I'm doing something for me." Her lips trembled. "But what will people think?" I felt something inside me settle even deeper. "There it is," I said quietly. "That's always been the God in this house. Not love. Not fairness. People." Mom's face twisted. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "And I'm done worshiping it." The practical step. That night, I did what I should have done years ago. I changed my banking passwords. I removed family members from any emergency contact forms. I forwarded every Harbor Trust email to a separate folder. I printed the top-up records. 8 years of contributions, neat and undeniable. Then I wrote one message. Not long, not emotional, just clear. I sent it to a group chat with Mom, Dad, and Mateo. "Salvador, I funded the pension top-up anonymously for 8 years. I stopped it on January 8th. This isn't revenge. This is reality. I won't be spoken to or about with contempt. I'm taking space. Do not come to my home or workplace. I'll reach out when and if I'm ready." Dad replied within minutes. "Dad, after everything I've done for you." Mateo replied right after. "Mateo, you're insane." Mom replied last. "Mom, please. You're breaking my heart." I stared at the screen. Then I did something that felt like setting down a heavy bag I'd been carrying since childhood. I turned off notifications. I used to believe love meant endurance. That if I stayed calm enough, helpful enough, small enough, eventually they'd see me. Eventually they'd respect me. Eventually they'd stop laughing. But respect you have to beg for isn't respect. It's a leash. I didn't stop the payments because I wanted them to suffer. I stopped because I finally understood the truth I'd been avoiding. They didn't value my presence. They valued my usefulness. And the moment I stopped being useful, they called it betrayal. 2 weeks after the pension check dropped, Dad sent a message that almost sounded human. "Dad, we need to talk." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back one sentence. "Me. I'm not available for conversations that start with blame." He didn't respond. Mateo tried one more time, a month later, with a different tactic. "Mateo, look, just tell us what you want." "Money? An apology?" I read it twice. Then I didn't answer. Because I knew the truth. If I explained it, he'd turn it into a negotiation. And I wasn't negotiating my dignity anymore. Now there's a framed photo on my bookshelf, an old one, from when Mateo and I were kids, both of us smiling with missing teeth. I used to look at it and ache for what we could have been. Last week, I turned it face down. Not out of hatred, out of clarity. I can love the idea of family and still refuse the role they wrote for me. I can wish them well and still choose distance. I can be kind without being available. And I can finally say the boundary I should have set a decade ago. I'm not your punchline. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your invisible son. I stopped volunteering for a role that only existed to shrink me. This story is about realizing your family values your usefulness, not your presence, and the power of finally stepping back. Salvador spent 8 years anonymously funding his father's pension, $4, $200 monthly, over $403,000 total, while being treated as the family punchline. When his brother publicly called him a disappointment at their father's retirement party and the room laughed, it wasn't a joke. It was the truth of decades spent being erased while secretly funding their comfort. The pension was invisible labor his family never acknowledged. Salvador set it up anonymously, knowing the truth. His father would reject it as charity, his brother would take credit, his role, as lesser son, would stay fixed. For 8 years, he funded comfort while seated at back tables and used as setup for jokes. When Salvador stopped payments and his father's pension dropped 63%, The panic revealed everything. They didn't miss him. They missed his money. His father didn't ask how he was. He demanded payments restart. His mother didn't apologize. She worried about appearances. What this teaches: when family only notices absence after money stops, you were never family. You were a resource. Respect you must fund isn't respect. It's a transaction with contempt as receipt. Anonymous generosity reveals who people are when they don't know they're being helped. Salvador funded retirement secretly. His reward was public mockery. That's proof they never valued him. You can love the idea of family and refuse the role they wrote. Salvador stopped not from hatred, but because being useful had become the price of dignity, finally too high.